at our state-of-the-art facility, all covered by your insurance. Call now, toll-free, 855-380-6136. Remember, at Beyond Wellness, be happy, be healthy, be well.
The views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the program's participants and do not necessarily reflect those of station staff, management, and advertisers.
Liberalism is back in style. Welcome to the evolution.
What if you knew Fox News was just lying to you? How could you watch when you know?
He was voted Variety Entertainer of the Year in the Excellence in the Arts Award. And is one of the highest Arbitron, now Nielsen-rated talk radio hosts in Las Vegas. He is also a refreshing voice of logic and reason. Live from the entertainment capital of the world, Doug Basham.
And good morning, my fellow wokes and Republican jokes. Thanks for joining me today. My name is Doug Basham, and welcome to the Doug Basham Show right here on KSHP in Las Vegas and on social media, and to a genuine demonstration of excellence in broadcasting. Hey everybody, great to see you all again. I am Doug Basham, card-carrying member of the Enemy Within Brigade, a.k.a. one sick radical leftist lunatic who needs to be handled by the American military. Who knew? My website is DougBasham.com, last name spelled B as in Bob, A-S-H-A-M as in Mary, DougBasham.com, my email, Doug@DougBasham.com. That said, I extend a hearty welcome to those of you listening on KSHP, AM 1400 and 107.1 FM on your radio dial here in Las Vegas. We are also broadcasting on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, TikTok, and of course, Twitter/X. Now owned and operated by the biggest and most childish troll in Twitter/X's history. Now, if you go to my website, again, DougBasham.com, you will discover it's all of one page. At the top, you'll find the show's logo. Underneath, 10 links, most to my social media sites, also one to contact me via email. The two links I'd like to call your attention to the most are, 1, my YouTube page, and 2, my TikTok page. On my YouTube page, I would respectfully ask you hit the subscribe button. On TikTok, please hit the red follow button. Now, if you would like to watch the show live and not just listen to it, reason being when I play clips, I don't play audio clips, I play video clips. From my website, you can go to either my YouTube or better yet, my Facebook or Twitter pages, whereupon you can indeed watch the show live. And the reason I say you might be better to watch on Facebook or Twitter is because YouTube did it to me again yesterday and deleted that show from my YouTube page. Reason being, yesterday I played Barack Obama's introduction at the rally he did in Detroit, which was done by rapper Eminem, whereupon Obama apparently used one of Eminem's songs as he walked out on stage. That, they say, was a violation of policy. A few seconds of that song got the entire show deleted. It's ridiculous, but it is what it is. And by the way, watching the show live as opposed to just listening to it, that will also remove any doubt whatsoever why so many people have said over the years, this is a face for television. 221-7283 is our call-in number here at the station, folks. If you would like to talk on the radio somewhere in our second half hour together, that's 702-221-SAVE, as in save our democracy, our ultimate and only goal in each and every show we do. And as the estimable Joy Behar said recently on The View,
he's cost a lot. I think we should lock him up now.
Well,
just 12 days to go, folks. 12 long, tense, nail-biting, hair-pulling, nerves on edge, panic-inducing, heebie-jeebie days. And so let's get right to our breaking news for the day. I began yesterday's show with just a wonderful ad courtesy of votevets.org. Today I have one from the hardworking folks over at the Lincoln Project, more than apropos, I would say, given the blockbuster John Kelly / Hitler story.
In the 1930s, Hitler didn't just seize power. It was handed to him by the wealthy, by the powerful, by a compliant elite, by people who thought they were above the angry masses and violent anti-Semites. He was given power by Germans who knew what he believed, but thought they could contain him, control him, that his crazed speeches and dangerous antics were just for show, that his hatred would never turn on them. But like every dictator before or since, Hitler used his power to bring death, despair, and tragedy to the world. Before the world said, never again, millions of Germans believed it can't happen here. Germany bet wrong in 1933. Will we?
He says, you're not going to be a dictator, are you? I said, no, other than day one.
Once again, folks, just 12 days, a few days after which, hopefully, we will learn if we will still be living in a free country, or if we'll be living in a country led by the most unfit, corrupt, dishonest, and treasonous traitor to ever rise to high office, and one who the people who know him best say is a fascist. 2 4-star generals, one says to the core, the other says for sure. And someone who we have heard in his own words vow to sic the military on those he considers the enemy within, and who wants generals to be loyal to him as loyal as Hitler's generals were to him. Not to the Constitution, not to the rule of law, loyal only to him. Real tough choice. And you know, it wouldn't be if not for one thing and one thing only. And that is if the overwhelming majority of those who intend on voting for this orange traitor knew he was a traitor and authoritarian dictator wannabe who wants to end the American experiment, not for the good of the country, but to keep his own flabby criminal ass out of prison. And why don't they know that? You have to know where I'm going with this. Raise your hand if you do. They don't know because of the conservative, corporate-controlled, right-wing propaganda, hate media, industrial complex. They don't know because of a massive propaganda infrastructure that a democracy, us, is foolish and short-sighted enough to let exist. And if Trump were to pull this off on November 5th, we would have no one to blame but ourselves. And that propaganda leviathan will continue to grow, fester, and metastasize, eating away at the very core and fabric of this nation until who knows what will be left. And then you will finally understand why I chastise both Joe Biden and Barack Obama for even allowing Fox News into the White House press briefing room. You do not ever legitimize the illegitimate, just like you don't ever normalize Donald Trump. Although most of the media has, having learned nothing, it seems, from 2016, But similarly, you do not allow someone into the press room who was anything but a member of the press. And the aforementioned media's audience that has been brainwashed into dismissing every single traitorous action Trump engages in and every fascist predisposition he demonstrates in plain friggin' sight, thanks to their propaganda media, their lackadaisical and horribly ill-informed attitude is either, well, he's not going to do that. That can't happen here. Or, he's the one that's been wronged. He has every right to seek vengeance. Acknowledging that this term has been used, overused, and abused, we are truly living in scary times. And with early voting taking place, it is now crunch time. I mean, forget November 5th. It's crunch time now. Yesterday, we featured a compelling clip from Paul Rykov, founder, CEO, and executive director of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, a nonpartisan nonprofit founded in 2004. Paul served as an Army First Lieutenant and infantry rifle platoon leader in Iraq from 2003 through 2004. Last night, Paul gave us another one.
It's gut check time for America. And John Kelly is delivering a gut punch to Donald Trump that will resonate. And I think it's so significant that he's finally come out and spoken for people to hear his voice. This is what we've been waiting for. The only other shoe to drop might be Mattis, right? Mattis hasn't spoken publicly, I don't think, on the record extensively recently. And that would be another body blow to Trump in the final hours that would particularly resonate with independents in key swing states, many of whom are veterans. But I think I keep stepping back and watching how much this must be hurting because they're attacking him so ferociously. I just came from another network where a partisan governor just crapped on John Kelly like he was nobody. They're crapping on the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the former Secretary of Defense, even, Dick Cheney. I mean, they've all lined up in a circle around Trump, and they're saying the same thing. And John Kelly's son, Robert, was killed by a landmine in Afghanistan. And that has got to be what's motivating him in this moment to ring this bell for all Americans. I'm a father of two boys. The idea of them joining and losing them overseas is incomprehensible to me. But if that did happen, nothing would stand in the way of me telling the truth and communicating the sacrifice of my son to the American people. And that's what he's doing. And it's hitting hard. And he needs to go further. I think if Kamala Harris wants to deliver a closing argument next week, have him there, have Milley there, have McChrystal there, have Dick Cheney there, have Mark Esper there, have everybody in the defense community that has served with Trump and is now opposed to him, and remind everybody that they're gone, and that if Trump is elected, I talked to Tom Bowman in my podcast tomorrow, the Pentagon reporter for NPR, and he says that there are folks who've told him that they're going to leave the Pentagon. They're going to retire if Trump gets elected. The brain drain we will experience in our military is like nothing we've seen if this guy gets elected, except for the folks who will stay inside to try to do what Kelly and Mattis and others do, which is keep him in check. Imagine a world where Trump didn't have Mattis and Kelly and all these guys around him. That's the world we're going to have if he gets elected.
Sage advice from military hero Paul Rykov. Yesterday, we devoted most of our time to the latest revelations that only further revealed what those of us who live in the real world have known for years. A, the utter contempt Trump has for our military. B, his inherent racism. And C, that he is indeed a fascist to the core. And that was a story I thought came as close to an October surprise as you could get. And if that information were to have come out on any other candidate, it would have been instantly career-ending, immediately. But with the gigantic propaganda media infrastructure designed only to run interference and lie for anyone on the right, it barely lasts a 24-hour news cycle, if that. And it wasn't just the right-wing propaganda hate media. It was the media that the right dishonestly likes to call the liberal media. But check these front pages from a few media entities. First, the front page of Axios. Trump's closing strategy: make a splash and attack. What two big global trends tell us about the 2024 election. Harris's secret admirers, but no mention of the John Kelly story. Now on to Politico. Don't let Trump's buzzy sideshows distract you from his traditional swing state strategy. Trump's transition chief under fire for totally sketchy conflicts of interest. And finally, the clock is ticking on Kamala Harris. Again, nothing about Trump the fascist wanting generals like Hitler had, but the clock is ticking on Kamala Harris? The Washington Post. Blinken presses Netanyahu on Gaza aid. Early voting leaps to historic start as GOP doubts fade. Russia blamed for fake videos smearing walls, a sudden closure years in the making, and in college hoops, it pays to be male. Not one mention of the John Kelly story. And finally, the New York Times. They broke this John Kelly story, and they couldn't find room for it on their front page. Instead, a scandal-plagued career nears a decisive moment. Abortions rise even in states with rigid bans. Once a pal of Mick Jagger, now a friend of Alito. And get this, quote, Harris, crime fighter by day, courted high society at night. This was a New York Times story. They broke it. It was their scoop. And yet, they couldn't find space on their front page to report it? Some friggin' liberal media. Well, you know what? I'm going to keep beating this story into the ground to its bloody death, if I have to, in hopes that whomever we might reach by so doing will realize the deadly seriousness of it and further conclude that Donald Trump should never be president again. Never again. And should be thrown in prison with the keys then thrown in the nearest dumpster and then dissolved with acid just to make sure. This is what we covered yesterday.
Hi again, everyone. It's now 5 o'clock in New York. There is some meticulously reported and stunning new reporting out of the Atlantic on the heinous racism and contempt for the men and women who serve and are injured and die serving our country in the United States military by the man seeking to serve as our next commander-in-chief. According to Atlantic reporter Jeffrey Goldberg, whose body of reporting on this topic is rock solid, Donald Trump, quote, erupted when presented with the cost of a funeral for a 20-year-old Army private, Vanessa Guillen. She was murdered at Fort Hood. Guillen is the daughter of Mexican immigrants. She grew up in Houston, Texas. Jeffrey Goldberg reports on what happened at an Oval Office meeting in December of 2020. Quote, at a certain point, according to two people present at the meeting, Donald Trump asked, quote, did they bill us for the funeral? What did it cost? According to attendees and to contemporaneous notes of the meeting taken by a participant, an aide answered, yes, we received a bill. The funeral cost $60,000. Trump became angry. Quote, it doesn't cost $60,000 to bury a fucking Mexican. He turned to his chief of staff, Mark Meadows, and issued an order, quote, don't pay it. Later that day, he was still agitated. Can you believe it, he said. According to a witness, fucking people trying to rip me off. That's Donald Trump using the F word to describe a funeral that he had offered to pay for a member of the United States military. With 14 days to go, we apologize for the profanity, but we want to quote Donald Trump accurately and be faithful to this extraordinary body of reporting. A Trump spokesperson denied that the ex-president made the comments and said, quote, this is an outrageous lie from the Atlantic 2 weeks before the election. But as Jeffrey Goldberg notes, quote, the personal qualities displayed by Donald Trump in his reaction to the cost of the Guillen funeral, contempt, rage, parsimony, racism, hardly surprised his inner circle. While this happened almost 4 years ago, its significance cannot be understated, considering the tight race that the country is facing for president. More from Goldberg's reporting, quote, today, 2 weeks before an election that could see Donald Trump return to the White House. I'm most interested in his evident desire to wield military power and power over the military in the manner of Hitler and other dictators.
And by the way, if you're wondering why I'm so enamored with Nicole Wallace, first, she's smart, she's intelligent, she's beautiful, she's articulate, she asks deep probing questions, and she's a Republican who is more concerned with being on the right side of history than protecting her rotten party. And finally, it's because of moments like this. She played a clip of Lindsey Graham last night. Check out her reaction.
He's a race-baiting, xenophobic, religious bigot. He doesn't represent my party. He doesn't represent the values that the men and women who wear the uniform are fighting for. This is the toughest guy I think I ever met. He's the modern version of Teddy Roosevelt.
I'm sorry.
No apology necessary, Nicole. No apology necessary ever. But you see what I mean? Just simply adorable. Since we covered this story yesterday, the New York Times has released more audio from General Kelly's interviews with them. Let's give them a listen, and this is a two-parter. We'll run them back to back.
What do you think? Do you think he's a fascist?
Well, I'm looking at the definition of fascism. It's a far-right, authoritarian, ultra-nationalist political ideology and movement characterized by a dictatorial leader, centralized autocracy, militarism, forcible suppression of opposition, belief in a natural social hierarchy. So certainly, in my experience, those are the kind of things that he thinks would work better in terms of running America. You know, again, back to this issue of, democracy is complicated, messy to operate, probably the worst kind of government there is, except for all the other ones. I think Churchill once said that. And again, our Constitution, our founding is built in to the Constitution and to the way our government operates, built in a lot of checks and balances, and didn't design the government to be streamlined and whatnot. So, but certainly the former president is in the far right area. He's certainly an authoritarian. Admires people who are dictators. He has said that. So he certainly falls into the general definition of fascist, for sure.
If he was left to his own devices, would he be a dictator if he didn't have people around him?
Oh, I think he'd love to be. I think he'd love to be just like he was in business. He could tell people to do things and they would do it. And not really bother too much about whether what the legalities were and whatnot. But again, I didn't know him before, so I can't really.
I mean, is he the biggest threat to the country that you've seen in your life out of all the threats, like post 9/11, all these different things?
Well, I think he's certainly the only president that has all but rejected what America is all about. And what makes America America in terms of our Constitution, in terms of our values, the way we look at everything, to include family and government. And he's certainly the only president that I know of that was certainly in my lifetime that was like that. He commented more than once that that Hitler did some good things too, and of course. If you know history, again, I think he's lacking in that. But if you know what Hitler was all about, it'd be pretty hard to make an argument that he did anything good.
So what would you say when he said to you that Hitler did a lot of good things?
Well, I tell him that. I said, sir, first of all, you should never say that. But if you knew what Hitler was all about from the beginning to the end, everything he did was in support of his racist, fascist life, philosophy, so that nothing he did, you could argue, was good. It was certainly not done for the right reason. And but he would occasionally say that. I'm not recommending anything to anybody. I'm just saying, other than that, when you're looking to vote for someone, regardless, you got to look at the character and all of those kind of things, and then start looking at the individual's policies. We can always, even if you're a conservative Republican, much of what's gone on the last 3.5 years hasn't been what you wanted to have happen to the country. But, we can get by it because you might have, a Republican come in the future. But if a person's character isn't at least minimally acceptable, then I think that person can do a lot more damage. We've got to, I just wish, I'll end with this, I just wish at the end of all of this, whoever wins, that person and the leadership in the country, certainly the political leadership in Washington to include the House and Senate, that people say, okay, let's take a breath. Let's step back. This has been really, really hard. Let's try to come back together as Americans. Stop hating each other just because we have a difference of opinion on political issues. I just hope we do that somehow. I don't know if we will, though, but I hope we will. I hope whoever becomes the president will start that process. Let's become friends again.
Let's stop hating each other just because we have political differences of opinion. And he hopes whoever becomes president will become friends again. I mean, that's a noble wish, but a futile one. One candidate is literally running on the promise to sic the military on anyone he deems to be the enemy within. And in all honesty, it won't happen if Harris wins either. Oh, sure, she will try. But if you think Trumpers were hostile when we had a black male president, wait till you see them lose their shisky when they have to deal with a black female president. General Kelly also addressed Trump's despicable losers and suckers remarks, as well as him not wanting to be around disabled vets.
But he basically said to you that those who died for America on the battlefield were losers and suckers, and he said it more than once.
Yes, but he would say it would always, that something else would get him going off at times again the game. He talked about, and it was like almost a recording, but the point is anyways, he would say it at times, sometimes unexpectedly, but he never could wrap his arms around why people would serve the country in uniform. What was in it for them? I think he just could never wrap his arms around why people would do things selflessly. What's in it for them? I think that's a much more powerful, but that's just me.
For the disabled?
Well, certainly his not wanting to be seen with amputees that lost their limbs in defense of this country, fighting for every American, to him included, to protect them, that didn't want to be seen with them. That's an interesting perspective for the commander-in-chief to have.
Why didn't he want to be seen with them?
He would just say, look, it doesn't look good for me. So anyways, I don't know. I'm not a psychiatrist. If you're a psychiatrist, I guess you could take a stab at some of these questions, but I'm not.
I played you several clips yesterday of credible and honorable people who essentially said, if General Kelly said this is what happened, this is what happened. Yesterday, a bunch more chimed in, including Trump's former national security advisor, John Bolton.
The Trump campaign has attacked John's credibility in any comparison of what John Kelly might say versus what Donald Trump might say about a particular event, or what these munchkins on the Trump campaign are saying about John Kelly, you can take what John says to the bank. I'm absolutely convinced. I didn't hear many, probably most of these statements myself, but if John says that Donald Trump said them, I believe it implicitly. I think it's certainly this recitation of what he's done should be compelling to people not to vote for Trump.
And next we hear from a former Republican Secretary of Defense, William Cohen, who offers a most impassioned plea for honesty and sanity as it pertains to the Orange Trader.
Donald Trump is the white elephant in the room. And while you say this is not news from John Kelly, we have known by word and deed what former president has said and done. John McCain was my friend. I was the best man at his wedding. I traveled the world with him. I was the honorary pallbearer at his funeral. And yet, from the very get-go, before the question of whether John McCain was going to support the health plan, the revocation of the Obama plan, Donald Trump was saying that John McCain was no hero. So he has evidence disregard for the military all of the time that he was in office and while he was running for office. So there should be no question about the truth or lack of truth with respect to John Kelly. John Kelly's not only a four-star Marine, he's a Gold Star father. He has flesh and blood that he has lost, like so many thousands of mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers who have seen their flesh and blood die on behalf of the United States of America, not to any given president, but to the Constitution. And you and I grew up, I believe at least, in the good old days, pledging allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic for which it stands, never to a president. So we know what the former president has said, and John Kelly has simply said it clearly and boldly and on the record. Chairman Milley understood what it meant to be used by the president, then president. Secretary of Defense Asper, same thing. Jim Mattis, one of the most decorated Marines in our history, has said, I can't serve you any longer, Mr. President. I don't share your views. Why did he do it? Because he knew that Donald Trump did not have the safety, security, and the interests of those people who were putting their lives on the line. He wanted to pull out our troops out of Syria, not over 3 weeks, 3 months, or 6 months. He wanted it overnight. And that forced Secretary of Defense Mattis to say, Mr. President, we have allies over there as well as our own troops. If you do this, you are going to compromise their lives. But then President Trump said, do it, get rid of it now. So we know, we have known, we are at an inflection point in this country. And what is shocking to me is not so much what John Kelly has said, but that so many of the American people now think this is a close election and they're prepared to vote for Mr. to be dictator in charge. That's what's shocking.
An impassioned plea from former Secretary of Defense William Cohen. Once again, we hear from war hero Paul Rieckhoff.
It's all about him. He's all about self, and it's the opposite of the leadership values that we were all trained in the military. That's why so many of these retired generals are calling out his character. Leadership at its core is about sacrifice, and that's something that Trump fails to do. And you can't help but also compare it to the fact that his kids are not that far away in age from Kelly's kids. His kids could have served. His kids could have died in Afghanistan, and they didn't. So it draws that contrast. But the contempt he has for the disabled, for just about everybody, is an insight into who he truly is. But it's also really, really important because he continues to be focused on such important, strangely important situations, like Vanessa Guillen. Vanessa Guillen, who he calls detestable things, sparked a movement. She was murdered brutally at Fort Hood. She's a woman. She's a woman of color, right, who was brutally murdered, that sparked a movement that resulted in the Vanessa Guillen Act that reformed military sexual trauma, sexual harassment in the military. She is a really important, pivotal figure in the transformation of our military. And he says that about her. And he says this about wounded people. So the thing I want folks to remember is the military can feel far off. It can feel like other people's kids. It can feel like the other. But I want to remind people, if he feels that way about us, how do you think he feels about you? the guy or gal who have an average job, or you're just working to make a living, if he feels this way about America's superheroes, how does he feel about you? And I hope that's something that folks remember in the next couple of days when they go to the polls.
Soon to be Madam President Harris weighed in on this John Kelly story. This is also a two-parter. Again, we'll play it back to back.
So yesterday we learned that Donald Trump's former chief of staff, John Kelly, a retired four-star general, confirmed that while Donald Trump was president, he said he wanted generals like Adolf Hitler had. Donald Trump said that because he does not want a military that is loyal to the United States Constitution. He wants a military that is loyal to him. He wants a military who will be loyal to him personally, one that will obey his orders even when he tells them to break the law or abandon their oath to the Constitution of the United States. In just the past week, Donald Trump has repeatedly called his fellow Americans the enemy from within, and even said that he would use the United States military to go after American citizens. And let's be clear about who he considers to be the enemy from within. Anyone who refuses to bend a knee or dares to criticize him would qualify, in his mind, as the enemy within, like judges, like journalists, like nonpartisan election officials. It is deeply troubling and incredibly dangerous that Donald Trump would invoke Adolf Hitler, the man who is responsible for the deaths of 6 million Jews and hundreds of thousands of Americans. All of this is further evidence for the American people of who Donald Trump really is. This is a window into who Donald Trump really is, from the people who know him best, from the people who worked with him side by side in the Oval Office and in the Situation Room. And it is clear from John Kelly's words that Donald Trump is someone who, I quote, certainly falls into the general definition of fascist, who in fact vowed to be a dictator on day one and vowed to use the military as his personal militia to carry out his personal and political vendettas. Donald Trump is increasingly unhinged and unstable. And in a second term, people like John Kelly would not be there to be the guardrails against his propensities and his actions. Those who once tried to stop him from pursuing his worst impulses would no longer be there, and no longer be there to rein him in. So the bottom line is this. We know what Donald Trump wants. He wants unchecked power. The question in 13 days will be, what do the American people want? Thank you.
Indeed. Looking mighty comfortable there doing a speech from what I guess was outside the White House. Not sure, but it looked like it. 221-7283 is our call-in number here at the station, folks. If you would like to weigh in on this topic or any other, that's 702-221-SAVE. Yesterday I played you a rather humorous clip from MSNBC's Lawrence O'Donnell. It was from Tuesday night and how he began his coverage of this story. True to form, Lawrence gave us another gem last night.
It has been 80 years since Adolf Hitler was a factor in an American presidential election, and now Hitler is back, with Donald Trump quoted praising Adolf Hitler, saying Adolf Hitler did some good things. Donald Trump has not said what those good things are. Donald Trump's response today to his former White House Chief of Staff, Marine Corps General John Kelly, quoting Donald Trump's praise of Hitler, was not to deny the words that John Kelly quoted Donald Trump saying. Donald Trump's response was a written statement simply calling John Kelly, quote, a total degenerate. Donald Trump did not issue a statement saying Hitler did not do some good things. Donald Trump could have issued a statement saying that, but he didn't. Donald Trump knows that he has the American Nazi supporters out there who are going to vote for him. Actual American Nazis. Small sliver of Trump voters, but he needs every one of them. Donald Trump knows that he needs every total degenerate American Nazi voter in every swing state to vote for him. And so Donald Trump cannot afford to lose a single one of them. And that's why he refused to condemn Hitler today and only condemned John Kelly.
And along with the rather scant coverage of this bombshell story by the quote-unquote liberal media, there were, of course, the usual Trump bobbleheads who did what they always do: trivialize, make excuses, and worse, legitimize the illegitimate and normalize Trump. And of course, the king of today's right-wing propaganda hate media had to justify Trump's fascist bombast. Let's give that a look and listen.
Doesn't make sense. Attack him all you want about his bombast and all that. Yep. We know that to be true. Well, but to say that he demonized servicemen in the middle of a cemetery, that just doesn't sound right.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. It sounds exactly right. He excoriated John McCain on national television in the quiet solitude of a cemetery with no microphones around. What better place to make such a disrespectful and disgraceful statement? But again, the normalization of Trump, that doesn't sound right. Yeah, to hell with the four-star general. He's got to be lying. But the guy who told over 30,500 lies in the 4 years he stained the White House, he's the one telling the truth. A normal person with even a modicum of decorum and class wouldn't say that anywhere, let alone in a cemetery. But again, Donald Trump is not a normal politician. He's not a normal human being. He is bereft of class, dignity, and has no filter. Of course he said this. But Fox News would have you dismiss the patriotic, heroic four-star general in favor of an orange draft-dodging coward. Disgusting. And what's even more disgusting, the weak-minded in their audience who have claimed for decades to support the troops, they'll back Cadet Bone Spurs. And now it was time for Brian Kilmeade, bless his heart, to amp up the idiocy. And of course, he began with the most insulting excuse: well, John Kelly doesn't like President Trump. I mean, really? A patriotic hero doesn't like a draft-dodging traitor? What has the world come to?
You know, Kelly has said Kelly's been critical in some areas and not critical in others. He says the president, he witnessed the phone calls when he calls the people that lose their lives in battle, whether it's Afghanistan or it's a training accident. And he says the president sincerely reaches out. Sometimes it was taken the wrong way, which prompted General Kelly to take the podium as press secretary and talk openly about his son dying in Afghanistan, what it meant to the family, and just kind of trying to straighten everything out. But the bottom line is, if you read H.R. McMaster's book, who is critical of President Trump in some of it and not in others, he talks about how Madison Kelly didn't like the president and they didn't think he deserved the job or they didn't think he was worthy of the job.
Because he wasn't. He just wasn't. And so now what you're telling us is not one but two heroic patriotic generals didn't like Cadet Bone Spurs? My word, where's my fainting couch? And stay away from it, J.D. Vance. And did you notice all that garbage he said? He said, well, Trump would say something and it would be misinterpreted or misunderstood. So John Kelly would get up there, and he didn't say stick up for Trump. John Kelly would get up there and talk about his son. He did not say John Kelly would get up there and defend Donald Trump. And I don't remember a time when that ever happened. But here's what's ironic here. Brian Kilmeade is far from being the sharpest knife in the drawer. But even he knows Trump didn't deserve the job and wasn't worthy of it. Kilmeade continued.
and they didn't think he deserved the job, or they didn't think he was worthy of the job, and they went out of his way to make sure a lot of the things they asked him to do that they didn't like never got done. McMaster would be frustrated because he couldn't get their attention, and he would say, it's not your job to rein in the president. It's your job to do what the president wants.
That's right. So if he tells you to have the military go and shoot protesters, you just order our fighting men to start shooting their fellow Americans. You do what the president wants. Good Lord, the stupidity, it hurts. And what's worse, that same stupidity is believed. This idiocy continued.
And then you factor in the fact that he runs his own company, coming from the business world, the first one we've ever had. It's not even a public company. And then he obviously has frustration. And I could absolutely see him go, now, you know what? It would be great to have German generals that actually do what we asked them to do.
Yeah, I can absolutely see him saying, you know what? It'd be great to have German generals do what we ask them to do. You talk about bending over backwards to put lipstick on a pig that has no lips. Yeah, it'd be great to have German generals who would order their troops to handle anyone that I don't like and deem to be the enemy from within. You know, sick leftist lunatics and all. But Fox doesn't dare mention that. It would expose them for the shameless charlatans and liars and Trump whores they truly are. Again, a propaganda network doing their utmost best to help a dictator wannabe become a dictator for real. It's disgusting. And as he continued, Kilmeade even gave Trump a pass, saying he may not have been cognizant of the third rail, namely that German soldiers were Nazis. But listen to how he says it. There's something about the way he says it.
It would be great to have German generals that actually do what we asked them to do, knowing that's a third, maybe not fully being cognizant of the third rail of German generals who were Nazis and whatever.
Oh, Jesus. Trump wasn't cognizant of the fact German soldiers were Nazis and whatever. Yeah, Nazi, Yahtzee, what's the difference? First, even though Trump is no brighter than Kilmeade, Donald Trump knows German soldiers were Nazis. Second, if we were to give your pitiful excuse credence, Brian, that's just one more reason he is patently unfit for office. And finally, this fatuousness mercifully concluded with Fox's token Uncle Tom uttering one of the most ridiculous statements of this entire ridiculousness.
Knowing that's a third, maybe not fully being cognizant of the third rail of German generals who were Nazis and whatever, but he was frustrated with the slowdown of commands.
It wasn't just a slowdown; it was insubordination.
How does one sleep at night after you accuse a heroic patriot and four-star general of being insubordinate, all to defend Donald Trump? I mean, must be a mighty huge paycheck. And if John Kelly was guilty of insubordination for trying to dissuade Trump from shooting protesters, what does that make Trump guilty of, or whatever? 221-7283 is our call-in number here at the station, folks. If you want to chat in our remaining moments together, that's 221-7283. To the phones we charge, and we'll start with Big Bad John. You're first. Thanks for calling.
Hey, Doug.
Hey, John.
Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, if you have any pigmentation in your skin, and you just listen to the brilliant display that Doug put on, and you are considering voting for this orange fraud, this racist fraud, good Lord, what is wrong with you? Have you no self-esteem? Have you no self-respect? This is a woman, Vanessa Guillen, who sacrificed her life in service of this country. And everybody knew when he said he was going to pay for her funeral, he was just looking for a way out. And for him to refer to her as an effing Mexican, By the way, if you're Hispanic and you're not Mexican, you can insert the effing in front of whatever nationality you are. If you're an effing Venezuelan or an effing Nicaraguan, that's exactly the way Trump refers to you. And there are many reports that Trump has referred to black folks using the N-word when he was filming The Apprentice. So if you think this guy likes you at all, you really need to look in the mirror and you really need to have a talk with yourself. You've lost all self-respect. You've lost all dignity. It's just an absolute crime. But by the way, this whole movement, this whole MAGA movement is based on white supremacy. General Kelly defined fascism. I don't know if you played that clip or not, Doug, but his definition of fascism makes it crystal clear what the MAGA movement is all about. It's about white supremacy. So if you have any pigmentation in your system, in your skin, and you have any self-respect, you must vote for Kamala Harris. You just must, or otherwise Snoop Dogg has it right. You're either with me and you vote for Kamala Harris, or I don't want you to be my fan anymore. I want you gone from my life. And it's just pathetic.
I was going to say, I agree with you wholeheartedly, John. I'm running out of time. I'm going to squeeze one more, and you enjoy the rest of your day. Carl, you got the last word.
Hey, guys. Listen, real quick. What worries me is that Trump, and everybody knows he's a terrible liar. But at a psychological point, what bothers me, does he lie and know he's lying, or does he believe what he's saying? It would be far worse for the country if he actually believed what he's saying. That is something I haven't figured out yet. Whether he knows he's lying or you have.
I mean, absolutely. I am no registered or accredited psychologist, but absolutely he knows he's lying. I mean, it's all part of his shtick. He says whatever he perceives at any given moment will benefit him and him alone. When he tells people his father was born in Germany, he knows his father was born in the Bronx. Yeah. He is just a pathological liar. And yes, you have to know where your father was born. So yeah, he knows he's lying.
Yeah. But I think sometimes he believes in what he's saying, which is bad. And then the other point about he wants his generals to be like Hitler's generals. Well, number one, Hitler's generals all had to be Nazis, because if they weren't, they were either executed or they disappeared. You have to be a Nazi to have been Hitler's generals. They couldn't be their own thinking people, like he says he wants. So that takes care of him.
But that's what he wants. He wants a military of bobbleheads who will pay fealty and homage to him and him alone. Not the Constitution, not to the country, but to Donald Trump. So that if he says, I don't like those protesters, go shoot them, they'll do it. I'm not saying they would, but that's what he wants.
Yeah, well, that's what he has to have. Yeah. His word has to be God's word, and that's it. And it's unfortunate. But I still think he has a psychological problem where he actually sometimes does believe what he's saying is the way it should be and is the truth. So we will find out.
Yeah. Hey, I appreciate you calling, Carl. You enjoy the rest of your day. Bye. I thought he was going to say bye. He just disappeared. Anyhow, folks, that's what they call in the business a wrap. We're done. We're out of time. But we'll do it all over again tomorrow, hopefully with you. Until then, take care.
Doug Basham.